It's 3 weeks later. I hate to say that not all that much has changed in 3 weeks, except 3 more weeks. The hostages have been sitting in the tunnels of Hamas. Um, and of course, in the last few days, we've had 4 casualties in Gaza after going through a number of weeks with no casualties. Our casualties have been incredibly light for two reasons. One is we're not really engaging in any serious combat in Gaza at the moment. Re we've gone back to the areas, some of the areas we were holding before the ceasefire. We did create this additional passageway, Morgan, that we didn't have previously. But that goes the second part of it, which is the fact that Hamas has decided not to engage by and large. They're engaging in here and there guerrilla attacks. What's happened in the last couple of days, the soldiers we've lost both times were guerrilla attacks against our forces, similar to what happened in southern Lebanon when we sat there for a number of years. That's what will happen if, by any wild chance, we end up staying for a couple of years in Gaza, which no one obviously wants. No, I say that back. No normal people in this country want at this point. Um, but um, but that's the reality. So we're there. We claim the army says we're holding 30%, 40%, all sorts of numbers are being given. But the areas that we're holding in Gaza, people have this imaginary view of Gaza, which is that it's this, packed place, 2 million people on top of each other from the northern end of Gaza to the southern end of Gaza. The reality is there are large, large areas of Gaza that are just open fields. And this is where most of what we're holding at the moment. We're not holding the major population areas except in Rafah and a little bit in Sajazia and along the edges where we've pushed out the population completely. We're holding the open areas to a very large extent. The idea, whatever that's supposed to mean, is that this pressure is going to convince Hamas to to agree to what Israel wants and not what Hamas wants. Hamas's goal and what it's been saying all along is it's willing to give up the hostages only in return for ending the war. That's been their goal all along. That was their goal from day one, and that remains their goal. And they were willing to give up a lot of hostages along the way for A, freeing Palestinians we were holding, and B, for temporary ceasefires because they held a lot. But as the number of live hostages they're holding decreases, then their fear is if they give up all the hostages, they will have nothing, no leverage with us whatsoever. So they're not interested in giving up any of the hostages without some sort of end of the war. And the one thing that Netanyahu is not willing to agree to is anything that smells of end of the war. Remember, there was an agreement previously. We walked away from the agreement. We were supposed to negotiate the second stage. We literally walked away and went back to war because Netanyahu could not negotiate the end of the war, period. And that's really where we stand right now. There are all these talks about all these plans. Um, Hamas is willing to give a 5-year ceasefire in return for in return for releasing all of the hostages immediately. Israel won't accept that, or Netanyahu is not willing to accept that. That means ending the war. There is a new talk today about a 6-month ceasefire in return for releasing all the hostages, and during that 6 months, there'll be negotiations on the final agreement. That has some possibility, but I'm sure the devil is in the details, and it's not clear where that's going to end. The Egyptians are taking a bigger role and a smaller role for the Qatarim for the moment, but it's not clear no one's the good guy here, but it's not clear which is the worst of the two. Probably the Qatarim, but um, we don't really know where it's going to go at this point. It's unlikely to bring any deal, but unlikely is never, never. It's very, very frustrating. It's very the overwhelming majority of Israelis, 72%, 68%, depending on which poll you listen to, all want an end of the war in return for the return of the hostages. Only 22% of the population, give or take, says we should go ahead and keep on fighting at this point. those that are saying keep on fighting, they're living in a never land of we're about to hit, an immediate victory. The problem is exactly, well, not almost a year ago today, Netanyahu said total victory is right around the corner. And we're now a year later. Total victory is not something you could easily accomplish against a guerrilla force, which is what Hamas is at this point, embedded amongst the civilian population. The Americans learned it in Vietnam. The French learned it in Vietnam. Other countries have learned it in other places. A well-armed guerrilla group is almost impossible, not totally impossible, but almost impossible to completely defeat. You can decrease their activities. You can do various things like we've done with Hamas in the West Bank, but you can't reach total victory with a group of this kind. Uh, it's almost impossible. I won't say it's totally impossible. There have been a couple of cases. The British in Kenya at one point, there have been a few cases of success, but not as large a group as this, not a group that has general support, not overwhelming support as we've seen, but general support. And not a group that has this crazy supporters abroad, a whole network of people supporting them in all sorts of ways. So total victory is not around the corner. And what we need is to get back our hostages, and that's what most Israelis believe and want. And of course, it's very difficult right now to talk about, they're talking about, drafting large numbers of reservists to go into Gaza to bring about the quote unquote total victory. The only problem is that amongst the troops that are already there, reservists are only arriving in about 60% of the reservists showing up. That compares to 120% at the beginning of the war. Most of it is just people who just can't do it anymore, family obligations, businesses that are going under, psychological impossibility of serving so many more months. And of course, some of it at this point is becoming ideological. People who say, what am I doing this for again? It's clearly not to free the hostages, which was the major reason that most people ran to serve, to get back the hostages. So it's very hard to see where we have a people's army and the people are not interested in coming to serve at the moment, which makes it more difficult. That you throw in the ongoing issue of the lack of service amongst the ultra-Orthodox. And of course, this government won't bring about an end to that situation. Not that it's easy to do, don't get me wrong. But the Supreme Court today just issued an order for the government to explain why it hasn't drafted all of the people, all of the ultra-Orthodox that are supposed to be drafted. And if they don't show up, why haven't they taken actions against them? Well, Aryeh Deri said, the head of the Shas party, the first Bocher Yeshiva, the yeshiva student who gets thrown in jail, he brings down the government. That's the reason they won't do it. They can't do it. And of course, the rabbis have become much more extreme in their opposition to draft and their opposition to integration. If any of you know people who give money to any of the ultra-Orthodox groups, convince them to stop. They only live from the money. I mean, the money the government gives is part of it. The money they get from abroad is the other part of it. At this point, their money, the only way to change the situation in Israel relating to them in the draft, and beyond that, to get them integrated into the workforce, is to end their money tree, which sustains them. And if they don't become part of society, we'll have other problems, which we can discuss at a later time or separately. But the reality is we need more soldiers, and there's no easy way to get more soldiers. And maybe we can replace them. Maybe in 10 years, we can replace them with robots. And I'm not totally joking. I'm only half joking. The Ukrainians are starting to do it much, much more. But we're not there at the moment. And I'm not sure we want to see it in the international. The international press doesn't matter doesn't mind when Ukrainian robots kill Russian troops. If our robots still start killing Palestinians, you can imagine what the headlines of the world are going to look like. I don't have to, you can imagine it without a question. But that will happen eventually, but we'll leave that part aside. So that's where we are in terms of Gaza. Nowhere, it's really. It's really hard to see where we go from here. Um, the government does not want to end the war. That's what it really comes down to, and will not make the sacrifice required to end the war. Excuse me, sacrifice to get back the hostages, which means ending the war. And it's, we go every every Saturday night, sometimes in the middle of the week, to the hostage square, and we hear the stories and the parents and the brothers and the husband wives, etc., crying out to bring my family home, bring my son home, and you feel hopeless. You don't know what you can do. It's very frustrating because go to the rally. Okay, I walk through Hostage Square basically every morning. Um, I can't do anything. I really can't. And it's very, very frustrating. It's not only me can't do it. It's thousands of us, tens of thousands of us feel hopeless in terms of what we can and cannot do with a government that just doesn't care. And clearly it just doesn't care, even when it talks about caring. And even when the ultra-Orthodox talk about Pidyon Shvuyim, the freeing of Jewish hostages as the highest mitzvah, it certainly isn't more important than not being drafted into the army. There's no talk amongst the ultra-Orthodox that, well, if you don't bring home the hostages, we won't, we'll bring down your government. That they won't talk about. We'll only talk about that if, you dare to draft one of their kids. So anyway, that is where we stand more or less. Um, Not optimistic. Um, Trump has lost most of his interest in it. We went from brimstone and fire will come down upon to the people of Gaza if the hostages are not released, to them saying yesterday or the day before, I'm not sure which day it was, saying I told Netanyahu to take care of the people of Gaza, to give them more medicine and food. And that's what he said yesterday, the day before. So all those people are saying that it was only Biden that was stopping Israel because Biden wanted food and medicine for the Gazans. Well, Trump said the exact same thing yesterday after his phone conversation with Netanyahu. So maybe Biden will force the hand of Netanyahu in terms of making a deal. Maybe Trump, excuse me. Maybe Trump will change. Will do so. What Biden failed to do, he did it once. Maybe in advance of the trip to Saudi Arabia, which is coming up. He'll want some sort of deal before that trip. Maybe. But who knows? I mean, we're dealing with Trump. There's so many unknowns that no one can predict where he's going to be on any particular issue going forward. So that's where we stand in terms of Gaza. And of course, domestically, like I mentioned, the Supreme Court gave an order to the government, explain why you're not drafting everybody. Of course, they have no explanation, so we'll see where that goes. The Houthis continue to be an annoyance, not much more than an annoyance. There's a new system in place now. They finally got that going where the home command gives a warning about 8 minutes before rockets arrive that there may be in your particular area a air raid siren come in a few minutes, and then it waits a few more minutes, and then depending on what the trajectory of the rocket or the rocket pieces are, then the particular area gets the warning. The last 2 days, two nights, the original warning went out all over the country basically, but it's a silent one. So if you have your phone on silent, you don't hear it. And then on Friday night, the actual warning actually came in just in the Beersheba area. The rest of us slept through the night. The missile was downed by the arrow system. And then last night, same thing happened, but this time it was the Dead Sea area. And same thing, it was downed. A few minutes ago, the second of two Houthi drones was knocked down as it was approaching Israel. So that was two drones that they sent to Israel today. So I say they were an annoyance because as long as nothing gets through, that's all it really is an annoyance. They're obviously succeeding to continue to fire both drones and missiles despite the US's day and night bombing of the Houthis. But like I've said before, um, history has shown that air power alone rarely defeats anybody. It's useful, you need it for ground operation, but it doesn't necessarily work in terms of defeating anybody. And that's what we're seeing here between the United States and the Houthis. Um, I think, I wrote about the possibility of a ground assault by the Yemeni government with the support of the United States. That would potentially work. I'm not sure how successful it'll be. The Houthis are known to be good fighters. They're fighting on their own territory. On the other hand, with close air support by the United States, maybe the National Army of Yemen could succeed. That would be the only solution that really would work. Turning to Iran, uh, two parts, obviously. One, of course, we can't ignore the fire that's been taking place in Iran's major port. What's burning is special fuel that came from China for their rockets. Um, Hear the reports. They said that the Port Authority has been warned that they were storing it in an unsafe way. That may be the case. I don't know. Um, the Revolutionary Guard has taken responsibility. They're not blaming Israel, although they wouldn't blame Israel because it'd be really embarrassing to blame Israel and admit that Israel did something. I have no idea if Israel did something or did not. Just happens to be the fuel they were going to get in order to rebuild their missile systems, and now it's gone. That port is also in shambles, and this is going to have an immediate impact on their economy. So we'll see where that goes, obviously. Whether it was an act of God, stupidity on someone in the port, or some foreign government like the government of Luxembourg who did this, whatever it is, it's probably a good thing. As to the negotiations, all that we've heard is that there have been positive progress, et cetera, et cetera. My fear, and I actually want a deal, but my fear is the Trump administration will bring back a deal and it's not going to be a great deal. The problem is two things, really. One, the level of negotiators, the people who are involved, have no technical knowledge. As I heard the former head of the Israeli intelligence agencies, both talking about that they've now added a technical expert, quote unquote, to the negotiating group. And it turns out this is someone who had been involved in previous negotiations. He was the PR spokesman, but he has expertise because he was involved in the previous negotiations. He, as this general said, you know, he knows no physics. He doesn't understand what we're talking about. There are no experts. I mean, Witkoff may be a wonderful real estate negotiator, and he might be an excellent negotiator at 40,000 feet. There's a framework of an agreement. He may be good. I don't know. I don't want to take away anything from him. However, and even negotiating for the sake of argument, the issues around the hostages, or even Ukraine peace deal, which is a whole other problem in itself. But even those things, they're more understandable and they're less technical. A nuclear deal is really very technical. And there are a lot of technical details, and they're negotiating opposite people who've negotiated on the Iranian side. They haven't changed all their staff. They haven't fired everybody who was ever involved in negotiations. They're not newbies who are negotiating it on the Iranian side. So my fear is, even with the best intentions of President Trump, and we'll leave aside the other problem that he wants a deal too badly, but we'll put that aside. Even with the best intentions that he may have, by not having experts in the area, you run into a real, a real problem potential of a deal that really isn't good, with, full of holes. And I think more than anything else, that's something that we have to be worried about. And we need to, that's the main concern that I have. The second concern, of course, is that Trump wants deals. He hasn't gotten a deal with Ukraine. He's negotiating 200 deals with 190 nations on trade. He hasn't gotten any trade deals yet. So maybe he wants to get some deal, and maybe it's the Iran deal what's most important to him to get. Um, so these are all serious questions I think that we all should be worried about. Israelis are suddenly waking up to the fact that while Trump may or may not love us, and let's say for the sake of argument he loves us, so far we haven't seen that love um, transferred in things that really count. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Um, that's where we stand with in terms of the Iran negotiations. Um, Optimistic, pessimistic, I don't know. Um, I'm one of these people who really does not believe in a military option. We can do it, uh, but unless the regime falls, all we'll do is delay the situation by a period of time, especially since they already have the enriched uranium. So there are no destroying the centrifuges will not destroy the uranium. The ability to actually destroy the uranium is very small. So I think we're sort of we're stuck at this point with a negotiating deal is probably the best deal. The question is, will it be the best negotiating deal? Other areas, Syria. I'm not sure what our strategy is exactly. It seems, well, I heard someone laughing there. Not sure what a strategy of basically applies to everything, because we truly don't have a strategy relating to anything at this point. We have no strategies. We have no people. We have no diplomats who are in charge of anything. Um, I don't, the stupidest thing that took place in the last 24 hours was the fact that we didn't send anybody to the Vatican for Pope Francis's funeral. The last pope that died, we sent the president of Israel went. This time nobody went. Supposedly was being angry because he criticized our actions in Gaza. Okay, whether we like the fact that he criticized what we do in Gaza or not, there's a world gathering of leaders all over the world, and we have a relationship with the Catholic Church that goes beyond the war in Gaza. It's an ongoing relationship, and we had a good relationship with Francis before the Gaza war. Not sending anybody, and it was noticed. Don't get, it wasn't something no one noticed. Is just stupid, just stupid. You send either the president could have gone. He was on Thursday. He was in Poland. He could have gone from Poland, and he had the Israeli aircraft there. He could have easily just gone on to Rome, or Gideon Sar, our political foreign minister, could have gone. So why we didn't send anybody? Again, it's to show that we're strong. Attack us, we won't. It makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. Although it makes perfect sense with this government. Um, so that's where we stand in terms of Syria. Syrians keep on making noises that they want, that they're willing to possibly even normalize relations with us. That would be a big deal. Will they really normalize relations while we're still holding Golan Heights? I don't know. Assad had an obsession with the Golan Heights. I think there's a deal to be made with the Golan Heights where we recognize Syrian sovereignty and then we lease the land there for 200 years or something like that. I think some sort of deal like that could probably be made if the Syrians are willing. The Syrians have very economic incentive to make a deal with us. And of course, that leaves Lebanon. It's not at all clear. The Lebanese army is doing more than they've done before. Can they gain control over Hezbollah? I'm not a prophet. I don't have the answer to that question. I don't know. There are some days where we can be optimistic and we see things that seem good and that there are some real possibilities there. And other days we just don't know. There were reports right before we started this that Israel had told people to leave one of the buildings in the Dachia, that's in southern Beirut, the Hezbollah area. Obviously, they saw something being done, weapons being produced in the basement or something of some building. So it's not clear if they've asked the evacuation of a building. Obviously, we're about to take down that building, which is most likely. But that's news that will develop over the evening. And domestically, we continue to have this issue between the head of the Shin Bet and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Netanyahu gave in a statement to the court in response to the statement of the head of the Shin Bet. He basically denied everything. There's a lot of question whether he was going to put his name and sign a statement that people felt was not going to be fully honest, but he did. So we'll have to see where that goes at this point. I think that pretty much covers all the wonderful fronts of our lives these days. We're in a war, but we're not in a war. The major issue we have is the fact that they're still holding 59 hostages, of which 24 are alive, and that keeps us at war in a sense. Thursday is Yom Ha'atzmaut. Wednesday night it begins. A lot of controversy here, both in terms of the people who are going to be lighting the lights in the ceremony, and in terms of how we should be celebrating this Yom Ha'atzmaut. Obviously, hostage families and former hostages all feel like we shouldn't be celebrating at all until all the hostages are home. It's a difficult issue of trying to balance all of these things. Once I call it sad note, but it's a sign of the times. Every year, one of the more the fun things to watch on Yom Ha'atzmaut morning is there have always been a ceremony at the president's house where the mitzvahim soldiers, the soldiers who've done something special throughout the army in various ways, get recognized by the president. And it's this fun ceremony, and there's some singing, and the chief of staff of the army and the president, and a bunch of people sing together, people you never hear sing, and it's a very nice ceremony. For the first time in the history of the country, it is not going to be televised or shown or on the radio, because the fear of people of getting to know the names of soldiers who can then be tried or indicted by international courts all over the world. We can't afford that, or the soldiers can't afford that. So for the first time in Israel's history, only the families are going to attend this ceremony, and only the families are going to get to see the ceremony. So that's a sad statement of where we're at this point, if we can't even have a public ceremony where we honor our soldiers who've done special deeds. Okay, I guess we'll turn to questions. Please wave your hand electronically. Hopefully I'll see it. If not, my wife will yell at me and tell me who wants to ask a question. Nobody? Come on, I need to create some content here. Okay. Abby.
You ask Joel to mute himself, please. His chuckling is bothering me.
Okay, I think I just 1 second. Mute. Yes, I'm getting. Okay, I just muted Joel, I think. Okay. Abby.
Yeah, this is a smaller question and just for my own information, but when you talk about the ultra Orthodox, who are you actually talking about? Like I've been close to the Orthodox community and I don't know like what the differentiation is in terms of who you're talking about that shouldn't be supported. So it's just my own question.
Okay, so the ultra-Orthodox in Israel, and the same way in America, are defined. There are two groups of them. Well, there are three groups of them in Israel. There's the Hasidim, which are all ultra-Orthodox. Anyone who follows a Hasidic rabbi, whether it's Chabad or whether it's the Gur, or there are a bunch of different Hasidic groups, those are all ultra-Orthodox by definition. So there's the Hasidim. They're the Litvaks, the ultra-Orthodox non-Hasidim. A lot of people live, a lot of who lives in Bnei Brak. That group of people who are ultra Orthodox, by definition, in Israel, they do not, they send their kids to their ultra Orthodox schools. They don't get basic education. In America, they also go to schools. They don't send the kids to day schools. They send the kids to schools where they don't get much or if any secular education. And those exist in the United States, certainly in Brooklyn and also in Muncie and a few other places, in Lakewood. All those people would be defined as ultra Orthodox. And you get in Israel a more complicated group, which is the ultra Orthodox who are supporters of the Shas party. Now, the Shas party is a Sephardic party that gets support from non-ultra Orthodox as well, people who have Sephardic pride, so to speak. And so that's how it got created. It has become more ultra Orthodox in the last 20 years. It used to be less, more. Its members used to all go to the army. It was different. Today, it's become more and more ultra Orthodox, so to speak. Their school system. When they first started, the idea was to give a better education to their kids. The end result now is they're giving a much worse education to their kids because, once again, they're not teaching them basic skills. So that would also be the ultra Orthodox. So, in other words, people who, young Israel of whatever, or all those people, that's Orthodox. That's standard Orthodox. Ultra Orthodox is, the shtibels in Brooklyn, or even some big synagogues that kids who go to schools that don't teach general studies or teach very minimal general studies will start teaching general studies at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Uh, they don't. No. So, uh, okay.
Thank you. That really helps.
Nobody else? Missing my ringer today. He's away. Um, okay. Well, if no one has any more questions, I'll go one more chance here for someone to ask a question.
Mark, take a look at the chat.
Okay, take a look at the chat. Okay, Theo, the chat. Okay. Okay, so we'll start with the documentary film No Other Land. I think we discussed it 3 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. I have not seen it, although I should. Um, Look, what we're doing in the West Bank is bad. Let's just start there. Uh, the settlers are definitely doing bad things. A lot of the army there are made up of people who are settlers as well. The settlers are doing their best to try to move as many Palestinians away from them as possible, to as many of them to leave as possible, to take up as much land as possible. That's what they've been doing. They've been doing it slowly since we began the occupation, to be honest with you. And it's bad. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have a deputy defense minister who is one of them. We have a security minister of security and is one of them. A fair number of the people in this government are amongst them, but amongst some of the more radical ones in their group. I'm not going to defend it. I can't think of anything good about it. But it's one of the big challenges we have. Michael, yes.
Yes, hi.
Now to the chat again. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Recently I've become aware of an organization. It's called Combatants for Peace. And my understanding is it's a group of Israelis and Palestinians who were combatants and now have, I guess, forsworn violence and are working together to try to create a shared future between Israelis and Palestinians. So it seems to me, I've been listening to you for, unfortunately, many months, although I'm very appreciative. I just see a lack of leadership everywhere, in terms of extremism and nobody and dehumanizing both sides are doing this. This group seems to be trying to counter that and recognize each other and acknowledge the reality of who's living in this area and how nobody's going to have peace. I mean, what I hear from you sounds like perpetual war under the circumstances we have now. So I wonder if you could just comment on this group or other groups like it, because they seem to be the only glimmer of hope that I've been hearing in any of these analysis of the situation.
Okay, so I know who they are. I know who they are, and I know of some similar groups like them. Um, Before October 6th, October 7th, there were more people who supported those efforts. There are a lot less of them today. A lot of them, people who are most active in those groups were on the kibbutzim that were killed. Uh, we all know, I mean, there are people literally who had spent their whole lives working for groups like that, and one of them was burned to death in front of their family on, on one of the kibbutzim right there. So it's really hard to rebuild that momentum if it ever existed. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's the only hope. But I personally have given up hope on that level. I don't believe we can. I don't believe we can reach hope. We can reach peace with this generation. Um, I
Well,
think.
let me ask you something. What's the alternative? Is it just perpetual war?
Okay, the question is this. Um, you could say perpetual war. That's true. There's potential, you know, and you can't fight forever. It's not a good thing. Um, we thought until October 7th that we could manage the conflict. Maybe we can consider that again. Um, there is no easy solution when, if we look back historically at the Israel-Palestine, the Israel-Arab war has ended more or less. Leaving aside Iran for the moment, we can easily make peace with all of our Arab neighbors. We can't make peace so easily with the Palestinians because throughout throughout our history with the Palestinians, the more radical groups within the Palestinian society have consistently managed to veto a peace with us. And that goes back to Hamas, going back, excuse me, literally to the Oslo Accords. Their bombings around the Rabin assassination, around immediately afterwards, which brought Netanyahu to power, which brought him beating Shimon Peres. Don't forget, when Rabin was assassinated, Shimon Peres was overwhelmingly expected to win the prime premiership over Bibi Netanyahu. Netanyahu won by a small margin because of repeated bombings that Hamas pulled off before the election. And that radicalized part of, enough of Israeli society to say, wait a second, how can we make peace with these people? All they're doing is blowing us up. And then, of course, Hamas's plan, which has worked really well, is that whenever they blow us up, we retaliate. And when we retaliate, we kill some Palestinians. Besides besides the people directly responsible, we kill some more Palestinians. So here we are now, 2025. The Israeli society has not gotten over October 7th in any which way. It's a wound that's going to take years to heal. I don't believe the Palestinians are going to get over the ones in the Gaza. How are they going to get over the tens of thousands of people we've killed during this war? I mean, whether they were justified or not, and a lot of it was justified, and a lot of it's war and it's collateral damage and all those things that that are correct in terms of our public opinion and PR. It's all true. However, it's still someone's brother, someone's father, someone's uncle, someone's etc. someone's mother, someone's child, that doesn't engender love, shall we say. All it engenders is more hatred. Can we overcome this hatred? Well, uh, we're not even trying. I mean, I understand why we're not trying on one level, but we aren't making no attempt at trying to do it. The only thing we're trying to do is export them to other places, which I think is very problematic because all we're doing is exporting anti-Semitism. If we look around the world at the rise of anti-Semitism, we'll find, if not a one for one, a pretty high correlation between where there's a rise in anti-Semitism and where Palestinians have gone. Now, are they solely responsible for anti-Semitism? Of course not. The right-wing anti-Semitism that exists doesn't come from the Palestinians, but the left-wing part of it certainly has been grown by the Palestinians in various places in the world. So there's no simple solution in terms of, yes, we should live together in this land. I agree. Do I have any interest in Gaza and the West Bank? If, I'm perfectly willing to give up 95% of the West Bank. I'm willing to give up 100% of Gaza. But before the war, I think I've told the story before. Before the war, um, there was a weekly demonstration a couple of blocks from my house of a group that was basically, see. I think that their English translation is to see the occupation in your own eyes. In other words, they would show the terrible things that happened that we did in the West Bank as occupiers. And I can tell you that going back it's more than it's almost 50 years ago, 40 something years ago that I served in the West Bank and in Gaza. We didn't do great things even back then. So I'm sure most of what they showed was correct. But I used to go up to some of them and said, look, okay, I agree with you, the occupation is a terrible thing. Now tell me how we can pull out of the West Bank and ensure our security. Mind you, this is before October 7th. How can we pull out of the West Bank? Give me a plan that says we can pull out of the occupation, and yet we can make sure that no rockets fall on Ben Gurion Airport, which is only 3 kilometers away from the West Bank, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the best one of them could say, well, we can turn it all over to the Palestinian Authority. I said to them, that's not going to sell to the Israeli public. If you're trying to convince Israelis to end the occupation, that's not going to sell. That was before October 7th. Right now, really hard to sell anything that relates to ending the occupation at this point. So the only thing we could do, in my opinion, at this point is figure out how we can make the occupation more humane, better, easier, and do things positively towards the Palestinians living in the West Bank. Let them have as much self-rule as possible while we continue the military control to some extent, but make their lives, it was our biggest mistake, in my opinion, all the way through. We should have made their lives dvash, as they say, honey. We should have made their lives so wonderful, even if we still had troops there. We should have made their lives so wonderful that everyone was like, "This is wonderful," etc. And okay, we'll figure something out politically. But we're short-sighted, and part of the problem throughout this period is we never had a plan. I talk about we have no strategic plan now. Well, we never had a strategic plan for the West Bank. We're always trying to decide going from government to government and how to avoid negotiations or how to give up as little as possible or how we had no plan. We've never had a plan. And of course, no plan over 50 years, you end up with the biggest mess you can imagine. So I endorse what you feel, but I fear it's not mistaken, but very problematic now. And I'll go back to one other point I've made in the past. Part of the problem that exists right now is the world has gone in the wrong direction. The world 10 years ago, at some point, started going from the anti-globalist movement for the moment. Let's put it in those terms, although it's a little more complicated. But the anti-globalist movement, the movement that used to say that mankind people were all people. There weren't great differences. We can all grow together. We can create a world where we can work together, be one. The differences between us are not all that important. It doesn't matter whether you're Chinese or Russian or Ukrainian or American or European or African. That direction the world was going 20 years ago made a U-turn somewheres around 20 years ago. And nationalism came back stronger. Religion came back stronger. And when religion and nationalism come back stronger, And the differences between Palestinians and Jews are also stronger and more acute. And so any attempt at working these things out or also working against a world which has gone the wrong direction. I mean, look what's happening right now today. Pakistan has threatened nuclear weapons against India. I mean, I'm not sure how big our headlines have been in the United States. There's only been minor headlines here, but just think about that. The Pakistanis, a Muslim country, have threatened to use nuclear weapons against India. I mean, could you get worse than that?
Well, I can tell you one globalization movement that's getting stronger because I live about a block and a half from Washington Square Park in New York City, and I routinely walk through demonstrations with beating drums calling for globalizing the Intifada.
Intifada. Yes, obviously. And tell me how many Palestinians are at the center of that group. It's infected beyond it, obviously. It's infected way beyond it. So yes, globalize the Intifada. Great plan. Great plan. Um, and and it, you suddenly, even if you don't like his methods, you suddenly have to be sympathetic to the idea of doing something with these people. So very problematic.
All
Anyone
right.
else?
Me,
Go ahead, you. Go ahead.
Marwan Barghouti.
Yeah, what about him? What do you listen? Okay, I have no question that 20 years ago, Marwan Barghouti might have been a solution. I have absolutely no idea where his head is at now. Do you? We don't really know. We have no idea who that man is because he's been in isolation more or less for the last 15 or 20 years. Um, so we don't know. We truly don't know. Um, and again, the question becomes, look, one of the problems now, it's in both the Israeli society right now and the Israel and the Palestinian society, is the radical parts of the society are the ones that end up taking control. Hamas, in when the Oslo Accords were signed, 69% of Palestinians and something like 68% of Israelis supported the plan. It didn't take long for Hamas's couple of bombings, etc., to change those numbers around, to the opposite numbers. And so the problem becomes, let's assume Marwan Barghouti is still, you know, the positive messiah for the Palestinian people. Will they be able to withstand the more radical elements in the society? I don't know. I don't know. I would try it.
Did you see the polls?
Which now?
Yeah, there were polls a couple of weeks ago. He polled over 70%
Yeah,
of the
yeah, he
people.
pulled, but he's an unknown. He pulled every the guy who's been in prison for 20 years. Do we know what he'd actually do if he was let go? We don't know. Did we
Of course,
radicalize him in prison? Maybe. I don't know. Again, um, look, if I was in charge of policy in Israel, I would be embracing the new Syrian leader 100%. I'd be offering support to the Syrian people. I'd be doing lots of things this government doesn't do. It's a risk, but I would take some risks for peace. And Barghouti might be a risk I would take. Again, I assume the Shabak has better understanding of who he is today than I do, because I don't have an understanding of who he is today. But I assume some people do know who he is today, and maybe it's worth a risk. But can that risk, will it go beyond the society? Look, I worry terribly about, you know, how can we possibly um, find a way of making peace with the people of Gaza? Right? What I said before, how many Gazans did not lose a close relative to what we've done over the last year and a half? Even if it was 100%, if it was 100% justified. Now, you can make the argument, look, how many Germans were killed in Dresden and all the places in World War II by British and American bombs. Many, many more, and I would imagine a higher percentage. I don't know the exact percentage, but I would imagine probably a higher percentage of German civilians were killed during World War II than Palestinian civilians killed in Gaza. But there wasn't an underlying animosity between the German people and the U.S. or even France, with limited animosity, or pretty limited. There was no animosity between the Germans and the British and all these people. A little bit with the Russians, but to leave that part aside. But there wasn't that animosity, so it was easy afterwards to come in, bring in the Marshall Plan, feed them. The GIs bought chocolate. Have our soldiers bought chocolate to give to the kids of Gaza? No, wouldn't something we wouldn't even think about. I'm not suggesting we should do it, but it's not part of how we're thinking about these things. And that's part of the problem because I've given up on this generation, but I'm worried about the next generation. I don't, what's going to be the next generation? And what are we doing today to try to change that direction? People think I'm naive to even talk about that. Maybe I am naive, but I'm not being naive enough to think we're going to reach peace anytime soon. I'm not one of those people. But I do think we need to be thinking about how do we change the direction? How do we make sure that the next generation, there is some chance for peace for the next generation? Certainly not by ignoring the problem, which is what we're doing. And without doing that, I don't see where it goes. Anyone else? See if there's anything else.
Yes, Mark,
Yes.
I have a question. I asked a similar question about a month ago, and you made me feel a little bit more at ease about it. But I'm somewhat terrified that the existence of Israel is in the hands of a man like Donald Trump. My father, rest his soul, used to say, Israel will always find a place to buy weapons to defend itself. That doesn't exist anymore. How can we trust Trump? Are the people there afraid of what he might do?
And Richard.
Okay. Okay. So people in Israel, I've always been concerned about Trump, as people who know me know well, and I've been concerned about Trump since 2016. I thought he was bad for Israel and bad for the Jews. Uh, he's been better for Israel recently in the short term. Look, the problem with Trump is twofold for Israel right now. I'm not getting into anything relating to American domestic policies. Um, there are two things it's problematic. Maybe actually three. Number one, he doesn't have a strategy with anything. He changes his views. You never know what his views are going to be. You don't know what he's going to decide. That's very hard to plan when you have someone whose views change rapidly, whose policies change rapidly, who you can't trust to maintain a particular viewpoint. Number two, he's weakening America in the world, which is very problematic because when America is strong in the world, America can have influence on other countries like European countries, etc. When people dislike America, which is what's happening more and more in the world, then America really can't have an influence on other countries. And number three, he's ultimately an isolationist. And isolationism is bad for Israel. And America first is bad for Israel. And so all these things are ultimately bad for Israel. Short term, he's been good for Israel. And short term, he's released weapons, all sorts of things. But on the other hand, he's Mikurok. You can't tell. Like I said earlier, 4 weeks ago, he was going to rain terror onto Gaza if they don't release all of the hostages. He meant our raining of terror. We'll leave that part aside. Yesterday, he says, I pressed Netanyahu to be nicer to the Palestinians in Gaza. So how can you make a policy relating to that? Look, America's in trouble. And again, leaving aside any specific policy, America's in trouble because you have a president who decides and changes policies on a dime. And so it's very, very hard to plan anything when that happens. And also when you don't have Netanyahu's big problem, the reason he won't come out against the nuclear negotiations that are going on, if this was in Biden, he would be screaming in Congress about this terrible president and all he's doing, but he can't do that now because the Republicans support him 100%, and he's burned his bridges to the Democrats. So he's stuck with whatever Trump comes up with, and that could be problematic. Harvey.
Mark, this is an existential question, and I don't expect you to be able to answer it. But how
Is there a rabbi on the call somewhere? If you're looking for a question like that, go ahead.
why should the generation of my children, the Jewish generation, care about Israel? And if I were to ask the same question to Bibi Netanyahu or Smotrich or Ben Gvir, they would respond somewhere along the lines of, "Well, we don't care whether your kids support us or like us or anything. We just need, we don't need their money. We need the bombs and military support from America." And so there's a generational gap that's gigantic. And I have absolutely no idea of how of how this passion for Israel that certainly is in this Zoom room gets transmitted.
That is an existential question. We can have a whole
Apologies.
we can have a whole Zoom discussion about that. Maybe we will at some point, but when it's worth a full discussion. I'll make two comments. Obviously, this has been a thing we've been fighting and discussing for many years, right? Various plans, whether it's birthright or other plans like that, have all been come and gone. Some have worked more, some have worked less. Summers in Israel, you name it. I mean, it can go over years and generations of different things. Look, some of it is circumstantial, right? I mean, the generation in this room, which is by and large older than the generation you're referring to, uh, came up in a different era. Maybe came to age post 67. Israel's a different place. Parents, were Holocaust survivors or lived through the Holocaust or some version therein and understood how bad the world can be if Jews don't have a place to go. There's that underlying understanding. Why should Jews care about Israel? Ultimately, for their own sake, in my humble opinion. My own sake is that you look around at what's going on in the world. Jews need a refuge. The same reason that Herzl came up with Zionism to begin with. There needed to be a place for Jews to go because the world is a dangerous place for Jews for whatever reason, for whatever time. It's been that way forever. And the idea with the state of Israel was it was going to normalize the Jewish people. It didn't quite. It created a Jewish state. And I don't mean a Jewish state in the sense that it's Jewish in terms of holidays and everything else, more to Jewish state in that it has the same anti-Semitism. It's just it's aimed at the state as opposed to aimed at individual Jews. So it didn't. Herzl was only half successful. On the other hand, if at any place in the world a Jew is in trouble, he has a place to go, and by and large, the Jewish state will try to come and help him. And that goes whether it's Jews in America, it's Jews in France, or it's Jews in Azerbaijan. And that's why he should care about a Jewish state. Should he care about the way, the state as it's being run today? It's a problem. It's not easy. I understand it's not easy. And I understand all the complications of loving an imperfect spouse, in a sense. And that's what Israel is an imperfect spouse. It has its warts, it's far from perfect. And the old saying is you can't, don't marry someone and expect to change them because it's not going to be easy to change the country. But it's the only one that people have. It's the only spouse. There's no divorcing really. You can become, you can decide not to be Jewish, and by the second or third generation, your kids will totally assimilate. Maybe that's a direction to go possibly. But look, I don't think things look particularly good for American Jews either going forward. It's let me put it this way, if either one of the extremes in American politics today uh, become dominant, it doesn't look good. And right now the extremes are the ones that are winning out.
Let me let me flip this just a little bit. Michael Steinhardt, who created Project Birthright, is an American. As an American, he cares about that relationship. The question then is, does Bibi Yahoo, what Bibi whatever, care about the generation of American Jews uh, 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 caring about Israel in the same way that Michael Steinhardt does? And
Okay,
I
so
don't
first of all,
think the
Michael
answer is
Steinhardt
yes.
didn't start it. He funded it. It was started actually.
Okay,
It started
but
on the Israeli side.
you get my point.
The idea came from the Israeli side. I won't get into that. I was actually involved a little bit in that originally, but leave that part aside for the moment. The Israelis do care. There's a whole system. There's a Jewish agency. There are always people who care about it. I think Netanyahu, in theory, cares about it. He just feels like he can't get support anymore because too many American Jews are liberal and they don't like him. If they would love him, he would care. But he doesn't. They don't like him, so he doesn't like them to a very large extent. Israelis generally care. They care more now, actually, after October 7th than they did before October 7th. You know, the same way they cared more after the Yom Kippur War than they did. You know, so when things are going good, they 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 don't care as much. There is more knowledge about American Jewry these days, just because there's more interaction with high tech and companies and everything else like that. So yes, I think Israelis care about that, but it's not a core issue. It's not going to, if you were to tell me that in order for if we pulled out of the West Bank for the sake of that would solve all the problems with American Jewry, even if that was the true case, those people who believe the West Bank is the single most important thing because God gave us that land, we can't pull out, they're not going to agree to that, even if it'll solve all of our problems with American Jewry. It's just one other factor. So I think they care. People generally care, but they're also not. There's no easy solution either. I don't know what to do. I've been touching that problems and involved in working on that problem since I'm 17 years old. And if you told me that I'd be the czar of the Jewish agency tomorrow, I mean, once upon a time I thought that was the direction I might be going in. If you told me tomorrow I was the head of the Jewish agency, I don't know what I would do that would be so different. Because it's a real difficult problem. The same way if you made me king of Israel right now, I'm not sure I'd want that job either because it's not clear what the solutions to our problems are. So it's just another one of those, I won't say insoluble problems, but a really difficult problem to solve that I don't have the answers right now. I'd be happy to discuss it further and think about it further. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we'll call this to an end. We'll theoretically get back again in 2 weeks. This week is Yom Ha'atzmaut. There will probably not be a Thursday. I'll take off Thursday for Yom Ha'atzmaut update, and I'm hoping next week, the week after this one. I'm not guaranteeing it. We'll start a podcast that'll go with the daily update. It will be a combination of my discussing what's in the update or what's going on with guests at least 2 times a week, guest interviews, both political, social, across the board of Israelis that I think you'll find interesting. Please give me feedback. Feedback is really important. So please keep on giving me or give me feedback, both in terms of the update, what you like, what you don't like, and also once the podcast starts, please give me feedback, what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see, what sort of guests you'd like to see, what you find interesting, which subject matters you want me to deal with in depth, like the one we just discussed. Could have a whole podcast devoted to that, and other related subjects. So anyway, everyone have a good week, and for those of you in Israel and everyone else, Chag Gatzmut Sameach. Take care, everyone.
Mark, you were wrong. My family in France hated the Germans for 2 centuries. Have a
Okay.
good weekend.
Thank you, Mark.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, Mark. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Bye.